All right, good afternoon, everybody. This is going to be our second session of E's class. What this episode is mostly going to be about is offensive and defensive mechanics. A lot of things I alluded to back in the first episode, but I didn't go further in depth about, and other sort of esoteric things on offense or defense, maybe a few option selects that the game allows. But first and foremost, I want to make an addendum of a few comments that I made in the last episode. I brought up how hit stun is affected more mid screen compared to having your back to the corner. That is not true. So I had to clear that. And I think that's like the biggest thing. I know that overheads have different starter timers compared to everything else, and I do know that for a fact that lows mostly scale better than mids in this game, so there's that as well. But we're going to start off pretty simple. If anybody in our Discord chat right now has any questions, use the Ease class Q&A here to ask your questions. I will have it open. I will be seeing it, but I will be asking more so for questions when I'm done talking about a specific section of this topic. So, offense and defense in ESLAF is relatively rough to, I guess, understand sometimes. The game is really, really simple. Like, almost to a. Almost to an insane degree. Like, it's really just simple stagger offense and so on and so forth. And it just makes it like really simple in that instance. Turn on stream on Discord real fast. That said, typically everybody in this game has a 4-frame button. This is extremely important, especially on obviously 4-frame or greater gaps, given how offense flows in this game. Now I'm going to describe that a bit later, but everybody should have at least 1 to 2 4-frame buttons. Usually it's 5A, 2A. And for everybody in the game, this is how you start your offense, especially point blank, obviously. So I'm just going to have them block real fast. And typically, because of this, your jabs are always +2 and 0. There's a few minor exceptions. I believe Tina's jab is the most plus jab in the game. Don't even try counter poking it, but it's there for a reason. Or I should say mashing on it more than counter poking. But characters usually have the ability to Gatling from 2A, 5A. Not everybody has this. Some characters can only 5A, 2A. So keep that in mind. Some other characters also get the luxury too. Rapid master jabs. And so on and so forth. So basically, the easiest way to start offense in any situation, literally, to just get in your opponent's face, is just start pressing your +2 jabs or your 0 on block 2As. Be wary though. Some characters 2As are mids, some characters are not, but that almost doesn't matter. The reason why you want to also start throwing in your 0 on block like 2As compared to your plus on block jabs is throws. Tick throws in this game are very, very strong. Throws are 1 frame with about an 11 to 14 frame tech window. I want to say it's 14 frames. So keep that in mind. It kind of goes in the whole offensive rotation here. And since throws are very, very strong in this game, it's very easy to just get started with, especially off of 2A. You can just 2A, boom, and so on and so forth. Doing it off of 5As is a little bit rougher because there's a lot of throw protection in this game, and because your jabs are usually +2, you have to delay it. But that's when you kind of just stagger with your jabs. And so on and so forth. Mine is lucky to have a 4-frame low, because literally having a 2-way 5A like that is really important because it keeps defense honest. You can't try to fuzzy jump that. Extremely important. How much throw protection is there exactly? I want to say about 8 frames on wake up, and usually out of block. Um, like that. See? So on and so forth. Obviously, offense changes depending on your characters. Some characters don't get the luxury of consistent stagger offense. Sometimes they push themselves out into more safer ranges. But I'm using mine as an example because he's probably the perfect example of this. At further ranges, you have differing options, obviously. Come on. Jesus, it dropped to 4 frames? That's crazy. Mine has far 5B. Like, Cecil has far 5B as well. Mainly, what your far 5B is in this game is your poking tools as well as approaches. Some of them are disjointed, some of them are not as disjointed, or some of them just aren't, period, like Yagabi. But good luck trying to counterpoke that a lot of the time. But yeah, this is another way of keeping offense honest at mid-range. You could treat this as like your Sol Far Slash in older gear games, or better yet, my favorite example is rocking a 5B, because I swear to God, this button may as well be. Can you buffer dash out of jab? Yes, you can. Infinite input buffer, baby. So keep that in mind. But yeah, playing at this range is funny. It doesn't really show with Kadora. Kadora has forced dash startup. So she's one of the few characters that cannot. But she benefits because she's one of the few characters with a 5A, 5AA that vacuums on block. She has to do that to maintain her offense. Like I said, other characters have other ways of enforcing their toolkits. Mine's is really simple. That's basically why I picked him. He's extremely simple. And so on and so forth. And that's exactly why. Other characters have to kind of bypass that either by doing low crushes or advancing moves to try to keep themselves in. But that's where parry comes in, which I'm going to talk about later when I get into defense. So proximity normals, again, far 5B, like I said. Some characters have them, some characters do not. So you have to keep that in mind. Proximity normals in this game are pretty strong. Alcott has the most plus on block close 5B in the game if he has the axe up at like +2, which is insane because that means he can enforce throw mix off of his close 5B where other characters can while also still having a run. You also have mine's close 5B, which personally I think is probably the best in the game because functionally on top of it being a very good pressure tool, it's an anti-air. You cannot jump out of this. And if you do try to jump out of it, he gets a very good starter. This is a very good starter. It also Gatlings back into far 5B, Gatlings into 5C, 5D, and 2D. So please keep that in mind. Speaking of Gatlings, I brought this up in episode 1. I want you guys to think about your character's Gatling chains because while some of them are pretty similar, with the exception of Tina, who doesn't really have Gatlings at all, and saving Tina, who more so focuses on flight, even though she does have a functioning Gatling chart, your character's Gatling charts are all relatively different outside of this. Close 5B, far 5B. If your character has a proximity close 5B, far 5B, odds are you can do this. It's pretty easy, super baby hit confirm, because most characters can do that on hit. You also have throw crushes, which a lot of characters tend to have. This is also very important. I will get into that when I talk about defense, especially when I talk about throws. Boom. So what your plan is on offense, which is pretty similar to like other games like BlazBlue or more so Gear, you want to find a way to Gatling into your safest option. and then either run strike throw offense or go into your again an even safer option. Mainly because a lot of C normals in this game, or some C normals in this game, are safe. Safe in this game is roughly obvious, like besides being plus, is around 0 to -3, because at that point, not only can you start being able to stuff fatal options, you can just start throwing people more, and they can't counter poke you. Or mash attempts get a little bit harsher around -3 because then you have one frame to play around with, which is starting to get into like more nitty gritty things or more so super heavy number counting. But as long as you keep that in mind, you want to just go into your safest option. Boom. I'm right here. Cecil can do options to escape, but mine being over here is still really good, mainly due to the rest of his options that he has to cover specific responses. Very good character. So I talked about Gatlings. I talked about going into your safest options. Obviously, you also have your pressure resets. Not every character has them in the way that you think. Some characters have really obvious pressure resets. Like mine 6B is an extremely obvious pressure reset point. Same with Cisco 6B and 6C or 2B. Mine has really good pressure reset options because 2B is only -1. This button is really, really good for this reason, and I'll talk about it more when we talk about the character as a whole. But your best bet is to find a button, again, that's safe either on block or on whiff, and either try to steal your turn or enforce the rest of your character's tools within their range to kind of control how your opponent can respond to certain things. Something also to notice about most pressure reset tools, they're safe-ish. So you can just do that. Mine is blessed because he has a pressure reset tool that he could kind of just bully you with even further if he decides to charge, because this character loves feasting on bad defensive habits. Keeping that in mind, and keeping how Fatal Shift works, I believe I will either talk about that in this video or its own dedicated video. Yeah, it's going to be its own dedicated video. If you have meter, you can kind of just continue to keep your offense up, because if there's one thing about Easlaf that you should 1000% know, is that pressure in this game is not long by any stretch of the word. It is actually quite short unless you have meter, or you are playing a character who has to expend another resource to keep their offense up. So you're basically playing around strike throw and your opponent's desire to try to escape a situation. But because of how strong offense is in this game and how typical staggers are, you can kind of just stop them and force your own form of respect, even if they have a DP. So, that said, other offensive mechanics basically range into less so fatal, more so now going into jump cancels, obviously. A lot of characters in this game have very generous jump cancels. So you can find a way to either reset your pressure this way too, even though it's a little bit riskier, mainly due to what I'm about to say next. But knowing what your character's jump cancels are allow you to rob turns if your opponent is asleep at the wheel. But the reason why jump cancels and IAD repressure is a little bit risky is because of the existence of any or 6As, or which other character has a pretty potent anti-air option. 6As in this game are all about frame 1. Frame 1 to frame 3, I'd want to say. 6As are usually frame 1. If a character has a 2C anti-air or anti-air on a different button, usually that one is frame 3, or a little bit slower when in terms of head and vuln. So, unironically, do not be afraid. If you see your opponent jumping at you, do not be afraid to just let this rip. More often than not, if they don't try to finagle around fatal shift options to try to catch you lacking, or to mess with the head invuln in itself, you should just let this rip. More often than not, you will win. And if it's an air hit, God forbid an air counter hit, things change really, really fast. Because, once again, the most important thing about Easlaf is that any and all grounded options are air unblockable. And if you know your routes, they die. And so on and so forth. So just keep that in mind. Back to throw. Throw in this game is honestly, personally, I think the most important aspect of offense, mainly because, again, it is one frame with a 14-frame tech window, which means it is virtually unreactable. Characters like Siska get a lot of mileage out of it simply because of how her mix-up works, and now you have to worry about the left-right plus the throw. But simply enough, just doing things like this catches people off guard, mainly because throws are always hard knockdowns, which is extremely important. Holy hell, mine. So you're just going to, like, wow. Frame drops? Frame drops? There we are. So you're just going to get your Oki no matter what. And you can enforce this behind your throw crush options, because fuzzy jump throw in this game is good, but you also have to play around the fact that, again, a lot of options in this game are air unblockable. So if you force somebody to block and they try to fuzzy jump out of your offense, all you have to do is put a button out. And if it's a button that does a lot of damage or is safe, either they're back in the exact same situation that they tried to escape from, or they're taking 3k in the corner plus being back in the exact same situation they tried to escape from. So, honestly, offense in this game is really, really strong for having a very solid layer 1. And that's something you should always, always, always try to enforce or build on. Because if you have a really strong layer 1 in this game, it gets harder to deal with, straight up. How common are air unblockable 6As to catch fuzzy jump? They're pretty often. Thank you for asking that question. You can kind of string into them if you know how your characters work and know how their gatlings work. You can kind of try to use it as a call out. But you have to be careful that sometimes, depending on what you're gatling into, it's not a true string. Which means if there is a gap, if there is a 1-frame gap, they can DP or 2BC. If it's a 3-frame gap, they can parry. What is the average jump start for characters? 3 to 4 frames. I think Yagabi and Alcott have worse jump startup. I don't remember Tina's, but mainly those two. Thank you for asking that question as well. I'm going to bring up jump startup. I'm going to bring up maneuvering around the screen when we get to the movement episode later on as well, actually. Tina is 3. Thank you for double checking for me. I do not have the wiki open at the moment. So, with that said, something I want to talk about more than anything are parry crushes. Because again, I brought up how parries are frame 3. It's just like Fatal. So if you can crush parry startup, more often than not, you can catch Fatal startup as well. So, for example, reversal action BC, right? Right? Parry crush. Characters have built-in parry crushes in their offense if you want to call them out, but trying to do that tends to resort to leaving yourself a bit more open and going to the end of your Gatling chain. You can keep it simple by just doing that. You can parry crush simply by doing 5A, 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 5A until you get caught. And that will always parry crush. Every time. Hold up. See? Why is my game lagging? See? So you can parry catch like that, and that in itself is extremely important. So there's only pressure resets that are common parry points. Um, they're either common parry points or common escape points in general, or counter mashes. Counter mashing in this game is very good because, again, 4-frame buttons. Having a 4-frame button in this game is really, really good. What about counterplay to mashing 2BC? I'll talk about that in a second because, funnily enough, it kind of goes into similar aspects as parry crushing, but because 2BC is a universal DP, at that point it's structuring your offense to deal with it or calling it out. Which is why I can't wait to talk about defense, because I'm going to start off the defensive section with my favorite saying about Islaf. But yeah, if you are smart and you know how to catch people mashing parry, you can just blow them up for doing it. So keep that in mind. Parry is frame 3, so if you find a way to crush your parry, boom. Oh, that wasn't parry, that was that. BC. See? Parry crush. All BC options cost meter. Only hold parry costs meter, but 2BC does, and guard cancel does too. So yes. But here's the biggest thing about parry crushes that makes offense really, really solid in this game. If you throw a parry, you do more damage. Which is extremely important. This is basically your TRM. Keep that in mind. That said, talked about all of that. Parry crushes, dealing with other system mechanics. So 2BC, again, is a universal DP, and it makes it a lot harder to just deal with off-rip, but you also have to remember something about this game. Buttons in this game are very safe. They are meant to be safe. So you could kind of just like take your time and read your opponent's habits if they want to escape or not. You can try to catch that. Sometimes people get a little bit too greedy and try to catch that. Or if you play Siska, you can kind of just avoid it by simply running your game plan and not being too greedy in general. The thing about 2BC, which makes it really important, counter hit recovery. So it's very good, especially on hard knockdowns. This is why most lazy forms of set play or safe jumps just get cooked, because you cannot properly safe jump 2BC. Well, you can, but you have to set it up properly, or like do a really, 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 really simple like knockdown. If you have a character who could do things like that, boom, that's a punish, by the way. And then they just blow up. So you have to take that into account. But again, a lot of the defensive options in this game have obvious counter hit states. So if you catch them trying to do something silly, odds are they'll take either a decent amount of damage or a lot. Common places where people like to 2BC is off of sweep knockdowns, simply because it's your way of getting Oki, and considering that a lot of characters, if not every character in this game, is a two-step character, getting the Oki or getting into that primed optimal position is something your opponent does not want ever. Ever, 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 ever. You do not want to enforce that. It's best to just take your time. But again, that goes back to the whole, you cannot be lazy on your safe jumps. Mine doesn't need to safe jump off of things, even though he can get safe jumps. He doesn't really need to. Simply because of how Charge Fireball works. You can also, fatal in response to doing things, or parry. Yeah, so a lot of your defensive mechanics also have offensive capabilities. Every single button in this game is cancelable into system mechanics. Every single last one. So you can keep that in mind. It's also how you use it to bait bursts. If you really, really want to bait your burst with parry, you can. It's up to you, though. At that point, it's just better to just block it instead of trying to call it out, because then if you hold your parry, it has more recovery, so you will get cooked. And it's also taking your resources, so you have to deal with that too. Now I get to talk about defense, because after I talk about defense, I get to talk about more how offense and defense flow, and then I got to talk about guard crushes, because that's the biggest thing people tend to struggle with in terms of this game on defense, right? Defense in Easlav is so good, almost to an annoying degree, and I'm glad it's like that, and it should stay that way. Because if defense gets any better, running offense becomes insufferable. And I love it. Like, honestly, being on offense in this game, while as silly as a lot of characters' win conditions are, still to an extent has to make you think, because certain mix-up options in this game are not fast like that. And then you really have to run around strike throw. And then destroying your opponent's options by either thinking of mix-ups to open your opponent up, or just waiting for their defensive habits to fall apart. So obviously, your first and foremost defensive habit, block. Blocking in this game is actually really good. The defender gets a lot more meter in this game than you think they do by just blocking an attack. It's really, really strong. The only time where this becomes a problem is when they start shaving your guard bar, or you start showing Fatal Guard a little too early or way too late, because then you just guard crush yourself, which is something you absolutely 100% do not want. Sometimes down backing offense and just waiting for your opponent to commit to something is the way to go, because you're either going to get the meter to fatal shift something out of it, which is a very good defensive response, by the way, or just jump to escape. If they commit too hard to something else, you can just leave. At that point, it's playing around how your opponent is going to try to snipe your landing, which you also, again, have the defensive options to play around with that as well. Very strong. Quite literally, if your opponent is just going to do this all day... Whoops, let me turn that off. Do mix-ups in this game leave a gap more than 3 frames usually? Sometimes. It depends. If it's like a command overhead, like... If mine is going to commit to 2C, that's more than 3 frames. You can air throw him out of this. You can just jump air throw. Some other characters don't have standing overheads at all. Siska. Like, all of her overheads are done either in the air or off of command jump. Or you have some characters who have really, 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 really cheap overheads. And by cheap, I just mean strong in general. Very good options, really. But they're usually held back by something else. Some overheads in this game are sub 20 frames, so you kind of just have to be ready for them. Example, Tai, right there. Example, Yagabi, right here. Game loads in. Sporting one of the fastest overheads in the game in 5D. Alcott now. Alcott Axe 2D is Axe 2D is really good. Put it like that at least. But the thing is, most of these characters either have to commit to something else to string into them, do the pushback, do them immediately, like Alcott can't he will never be able to string into overhead unless it's off of like close 5B or a jab because the pushback is too high. And yeah, Blackjet in chat says it. Usually not. You make them not have the gaps on purpose to not have to deal with them. Yeah, that's the biggest thing you have to do. If you want your mix-ups to be airtight, you have to spend a resource or do something crazy to make them not do that. Like Kadora, for all of her insane mix-up potential, the mix-ups only mean so much if she can land a sigil behind them to make them not as good, or make it a lot harder to deal with. Otherwise, the mix-up is just good instead of annoying. Is the best way to put it. Like, besides that, you're dealing with like instant overhead stuff and whatnot. Some of them are relatively reactable. Good luck, because I mean that's where we start getting into reaction wars and starting to talk about things in the vacuum. Good luck is the best way I could put it. But again, down backing or just holding 4, best friend. If you don't want to block, you can parry. Parry is 3-frame startup. It catches absolutely everything. I talked about this in the overall system mechanics of Eastlaugh in the first video, but now I get to talk about it more in depth here. You can parry in the ground and in the air. It catches anything from frame 3 onwards. It reacts differently to parries compared to it reacts differently to strikes compared to projectiles. So you have to keep that in mind. You're not going to be parrying Tina. You're not doing that. Unless she is right in front of you, you are not going to parry her. Bad idea. The thing about parry goes back to being parry crushed. If your opponent's offense is sloppy and they're leaving bigger gaps on purpose, that's when you can kind of just start showing parry as a response. If they're trying to do like constant redash pressure, and I mean like just deep dashing into buttons instead of just keeping it a little bit lighter, you could just show it once, and then they get cooked. But then you also have to play around the threat of throw, which, mind you, if you have meter, you can confirm off of mid-screen, and if you're in the corner, you get a convert off of it all the time. So, that said, it is still very strong, especially against fatal shifted moves. And I plan on talking about this again when we get to the fatal shift video. Just being able to do this to your opponent is insane. Like, that's very, very, very strong. You have to keep that in mind. Fatal parry is not only plus, you're completely invincible, so your opponent can't stop it from happening when it happens. Against Fatal Shift specifically, parries are frame 1 instead of frame 3. And it forces hard knockdown. If you're lucky, I'm so serious, you can string off of your fatal parry. It's that good. You cannot just freely throw fatal shifted moves in neutral or like on an offense sometimes and feel like your opponent is not going to know. The only time that they really cannot parry it is if they properly string into it. But if you leave a gap and then they can hold the parry and call you out, odds are you're going to get fatal parried, and then your turn is just done. By force, your turn is over. You cannot do anything about it. You have to hold that. Like, parry is a very strong mechanic in this game. 2BC is a universal DP. Honestly, if you're just sitting on a surplus of meter and you don't want to feel like sending out a fatal shift because you don't want to cause a screen flash, you could just do this. It's not super small. If you're right, your opponent gets launched back into neutral and you get to play neutral again. The only thing you have to deal with is you have to deal with the meter cooldown a bit, which sucks. Being a meter cooldown in this game is not a good feeling at all. can also do it in the air. This is a way to escape certain air to ground strings that try to go into air unblockables. And that's another thing that Blackjet tested for me based on what I was talking about in the last video, that you could technically either jump out or parry out of certain air to ground strings. If the string is tight enough, you cannot. You will get cooked every time. So you have to be very, very careful about how you approach in the air or use your system mechanics, because again, ground and normals are air unblockable. Very scary situation to be in. Lastly, there is guard cancel, which is your typical counter assault, dead angle, just any guard cancel attack that you block cancel, one hit, boom, 2 meters. You could do it in the air as well, which is very important because that goes back into the air to ground string issue that I was talking about. If you deal with that and you have the meter, you just don't want to be in that situation, you could just do it. So keep that in mind as well. Other defensive options, backdashes. Yeah, backdashes cost your guard bar, and that's where things get scary, because if you keep backdashing in this game, you will just lose. You will get guard crushed, and you will take a whole lot of damage. But backdashes being around frame 2 to frame 3 is still important due to the fact that if your opponent is not meeting you properly on wake up, you just leave. And if you're a character like Cisco, who literally backflips away and is able to use air options, she can just not be in the situation at all. Some characters don't get that luxury, sadly. If at all. Yeah, Yag has a spot dodge, which is better, well, better but worse, but then you also have that, which isn't the worst backdash in the game. It's actually pretty decent. It's just you're in a backdash competition with that. So it really comes down to it being character dependent. Or, you know, your Yagabi who doesn't. And it's really weird to just put it like that, but I'm so serious. He just does not. Yeah, Yag conditional for the fatal lesson. Oh no, don't worry. We're going to talk about this. Yeah, you can fatal your backdashes in this game. Pretty important. We'll talk about that when we talk about that. Yeah, a lot of backdashes are crazy good, like mine and Kadora. Yes, absolutely. Backdashes in this game are very, very good. For that reason specifically. Now I get to talk about Fatal Guard. The one mechanic everybody genuinely struggles with. Every time you hold an input and the game is considered that, you get cooked. If a game catches you holding inputs and block stun, you will just get fried. So you absolutely just have to get cooked. And just take your time. Just don't press anything. The reason why this becomes a bit more of an issue is against these staggers, because you're going to want to take your turn back because you're going to feel there's a gap there, but it's either not there or it's too small. So you're either going to get counter hit or you're getting this. And then you have to deal with the fact that, oh, now my opponent knows I'm pressing buttons, so they're going to start structuring offense around me pressing buttons. This is why offense is so good in Easlav, because you can bait how your opponent wants to play defense. If they want to start pressing buttons or fuzzy mashing, they can, or you take their guard bar away from them. So now your opponent has to use the other system mechanics given to them instead of just trying to press buttons. And then we talk about my favorite mechanic, Guard Crush. Getting Guard Crushed in this game kind of sucks because you take bonus damage upon getting Guard Crushed, which means you're going to take more damage from the character's best or second best starter. Fun fact, this is why I taunt, because please don't get Guard Crushed. Please don't get Guard Crushed in this game. It sucks. Also, yeah. And then the bad thing happens. Imagine taking 50% because you got Guard Crushed. I love how whenever we talk about Guard Crushes, somebody posts the Kadora gif every time. Yes, Guard Crushes in this game are a very painful reminder to just don't mash. Well, mash, just wait. Because if you notice something about this game, something really important about this game, I mean really important, pushback in this game is really high. So some characters have to commit more to redashing on offense. Or sliding in other ways of stopping offense. Or committing to offense. See? I couldn't, for the life of me, I could not stay in there. Boom. So I have to do things like that. And so on and so forth. It's why Kadora offense without sigil set is only all right, mainly because she can't run properly. She's stuck in dash startup, so she can't run at you. So she has to stagger with like 5A, 5AA, and so on and so forth. Yeah, you can still mash, but you actually have to genuinely think about how you are mashing buttons in this game. Because if you do not, you're going to get Guard Crushed a lot, and you're going to be like, well, why am I getting Guard Crushed? This is a stupid mechanic, when it really isn't. And also, defense in this game is so strong that you can just leverage doing nothing sometimes. You can just down back and wait. See? She, like, Kadora has buttons that have to pull you towards her because she can't stay in your face. And then when she wants to stay in, her best buttons to stay in don't gatling into each other like that. They're not true strings. So it's a commitment. See? Either her buttons have to pull you in to stop you from getting away from her, or she has to commit harder to approaching you. But what if I want to brainlessly mash every waking second of the match? Then die. Then lose. Like, it's going to happen. You could mash your fatal reversals. If you can, or have one, depending on how big the gap is. But again, if the move innately already doesn't have invul and you try to fatal it, you still will deal with the 3-frame startup penalty, so you will get cooked if your opponent just meaties you properly. So keep that in mind. All right, 44 minutes in. I talked about parry crushes. I talked about defense. I already talked about burst last video. I don't want to talk about it that much. Does anybody else have any other questions they would like to ask as we wrap up? Because I think I tackled offense in itself, and I'm going to give a summary of what I talked about. Hopefully, one more concise, because as much as I love yapping about it and being mostly unscripted with it, I would want to be a little bit more in line with how I explain what I'm going to say next. Oh, is the wiki accurate for frame data? Mostly. Alcott's is still under development. That's my fault for being lazy and then getting sick and then being lazy and then going to work and then being lazy. So I'm going to have to grab all the new sprites and then reformat everything. Luckily, Mitchell gave me all the tools to do that. I just need to not be lazy. Did you mention backdash guard cancel or did I miss that? Thank you, actually. That this goes to show how funny this mechanic is because I never talked about it. So, in this game, you can actually guard cancel backdash. It's not bad. It's actually pretty decent, mainly because what it does against people is it forces them to not try to do silly mix-ups mid-screen and if they're unable to chase. It's basically a one guard bar way of saying, I don't want to be here. However, if your opponent could chase, that happens. See? Ooh, why is my game lagging? Jesus. So keep that in mind. Yeah, it's good when playing footsies or more so defending against it because now what your opponent is forced to do is they have to commit harder to catching your defensive habits, which is what makes it good. You never do this in the corner. Never in your life backdash guard cancel backdash in the corner. You will just lose. It doesn't do anything for you there. Is neutral going to be covered? Honestly, I could cover neutral. Huh. You know what? I'll cover that in the movement section. I'm going to make an addendum to that. I'll make it movement and neutral. Mainly because of how neutral is played in this game. It's really, really easy to put yourself in a lot of pitfalls as a beginner. Even as a person who's been playing for a while, I've been playing this game forever, and I still do really dumb neutral things. Like, I'll just randomly ID it. Somebody's like, wait, why am I IDing at you in a game with a one-frame head invul and anti-air and then get blasted for 4K every time? So, going off of offense, defense, and when I do talk about movement, and then in lieu of movement, I will also talk about neutral. That will wrap up the first part about not talking about metered options, because then after that is when we start getting into the nitty gritty, or we start talking about metered options as well as resource saving, spending, and burst. Honestly, I could put the fatal shift and the resource videos together. Is this going to be in a YouTube video where I can rewatch it later? Yes, actually, I'm recording this as we speak. Whenever I record these, I put them up on YouTube almost immediately afterwards. Oh, yeah. If anything, I will repost the first video in the Ease class chat. But I think we are now towards the end of this video. So I will sum up everything that I talked about in a far more concise way. Offense in this game is very, very powerful. It is a game of high character strengths and really silly options when characters get started that make it really hard to defend against. Unironically, you'll deal with like Saving Tina, and while Saving Tina's neutral isn't the greatest, she'll then hit you, and now you're dealing with 350-50s back to back that go into 3k plus every single time you have to guess, Or you're going to deal with Siska, who just hit you, and now all of a sudden her phase two is, I'm going to make sure you can't block anything I'm about to do. You're going to do everything, and you're still probably going to get hit. Or you have simple step twos like Mines, who just says, I have my buff, I'm going to kill you. And you have to deal with that because the offense is still super strong and the neutral's really good. So keep that in mind. But in lieu of offense and these characters being as good as they are, defense in this game is really simple because of how strong it is. You don't have to do more. You don't have to necessarily think about instant block because the game already has a bunch of pushback on normal, so you have to think about it that way. You don't have to think about like barrier stuff. Option selects, more so your only real offensive option select is if somebody's mashing or more so trying to string you up and there's a gap because they're trying too hard to call things out. You could just fatal dash and you'll run at them. Catch the recovery too. It's really, really, really good. You could also fuzzy jump throw. Like 171 AB is still a thing. If people are trying too hard to either IAD or do pressure resets that put them in the air or jumping around, you just fuzzy jump throw. Very good. Is there dash recovery? No, there is not. You can, well, I want to say with the exception of Kadora, but I think even Kadora could properly dash block now. She just has mad dash startup. You can dash block in this game. Very, very consistently. That's what also makes like neutral and defense really good, because normally you would have to like barrier break or something to not get clipped by anything in other games, like, you know, Arx's games like Blaze Blue, old Guilty Gear. You can just dash block in this game freely. Alright, we're coming up on 52 minutes. Anything else anybody would like to ask? Because if not, I will send all of y'all away and class will be dismissed. How do you beat me? Honestly, it's not that hard. If anybody else is done, if everybody else is done asking questions, then you know what? I will do my closing statements as the game decides to drop frames freely. Holy sheesh, my CPU is getting fried. I might have to turn down my bitrate. That said, next episode will be about neutral and movement. If anybody has any opinions or has any ideas of what to go over, I'm free to take them. This is mostly open forum. This is for me to help everybody get in the game in their own way. There's other people making a bunch of guides for characters. Havok's 7-minute guide is still extremely good for this game. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. I will probably link that again. It's still in the description of the first episode. And with that said, Ease Class Episode 2 is now finished. Class is dismissed. Have a wonderful rest of your day, everybody.